Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Bleach, Agent of the Shinigami Arc, episode 19, Ichigo Becomes a Hollow. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of exactly what happened within this episode. Alright, so we start this episode with Rukia in prison. Now, I realized that I had forgotten in the last episode to point out that there was like a 2-minute scene between Rukia and Renji where Renji basically was trying to reassure Rukia that Byakuya would go to bat for her and try to get a reduced sentence. It was very short in the last episode, kind of forgot about it, but it directly pertains to the start of this episode where we have Renji in shock because Byakuya has come and delivered the death sentence to Rukia, stating that she is going to be kept on death row and then executed in 25 days in like the central courtyard or whatever of the Shinigami. And Renji, of course, is surprised by this because he genuinely thought Byakuya would try to get a reduced sentence. However, as Rukia had said, she does not believe Byakuya cares for her and did not foresee that happening, and she is the one who is proven right, as this episode shows him delivering said death sentence. We then move away from the Soul Society to the modern era, and we check in with Inoue Yoruichi. That is such a hard name to say. Yoruichi, Shadow, and Inoue, who are training together, and they're both trying to recall their powers, but they're both having trouble with it. So Yoruichi tells them to envision when they first discovered their powers, what it was that they were trying to protect and use their powers for, as that should help them to recall it. Shadow's memory is not very good, and he does not manage to do so. However, Inoue does manage to remember that it was Tatsuki that she was trying to protect, and she manages to call her power at will, call it out. However, the power then kind of becomes, well, all of the personalities kind of conflict, and Yoruichi comments on how now they'll have to train her in how to control her power and order for her to be able to actually use it effectively. We then spend the rest of the episode with Ichigo and his training, and he's still at the bottom of the hole, though we have had 70 out, or most of the 72 hours having passed at this point, and Ichigo has not made much progress, but has gone through several cycles of corrosion on his chain, and now he has only a short amount remaining. And that is when Jinta comes down and basically tells him that he's spent 70 hours out of the 72. The last corrosion is going to happen more quickly and ferociously than the others, and he's about to turn into a hollow. We then see Ichigo's chain dissolving, and in fact, a mask does begin to grow. And at first, Uryu and Jinta and Tessai are all planning to stop Ichigo. However, Urahara stops them, says to give him a bit more time, as typically when a hollow forms, the soul shatters first, becomes a new form, and then the mask forms. But the fact that the mask is forming first is a sign that Ichigo is resisting, and so there is still a chance, and they should hold off for a little bit longer. We then have a scene in Ichigo's mindscape where he meets Zangetsu, but he isn't able to hear his voice. Like, he's able to hear his voice, but not hear his name as of yet. And basically, Zangetsu tells him in his mindscape that Rukia's powers were destroyed by Byakuya. However, Ichigo always had the potential on his own to become a Shinigami, and those powers that belong to him still reside within him, as Byakuya in his arrogance did not believe that there would be the possibility of powers beyond Rukia's, and so only destroyed those ones, not Ichigo's innate powers. And therefore, if Ichigo is able to find within his soul his Shinigami powers, he still can awaken them. And that is when Ichigo falls into some water, all these white boxes fall around him, and then he flashes back to when Ishida had told him that the ribbons that represent a person's soul, Shinigamis, are red, and he then sees the red ribbon, pulls it, opening the box. Inside the box is the handle to his Zanpakuto, which he realizes that the older man that he is talking to is his Zanpakuto, but again, he wasn't able to hear his name. So he is encouraged to pull out the Zanpakuto before he fully holloizes and before his inner world completely crumbles. He does so, and we get this major blast in the room under Urahara's store, and we see that Ichigo has in fact escaped from the hole, and he is a Shinigami, and he does have the hollow mask. He uses the butt of his sword to break the mask, pulling it off, revealing that he had awakened his Shinigami powers, but just in time, as he almost had become a hollow as he had the mask. And he basically then says to Urahara that, he swore to himself if he got out of that hole, he was going to destroy him. And Urahara then basically congratulates him. You've passed lesson 2, lesson 3, let's fight. And that is where we end this episode. Now that we've been reminded about what happens, it's now time to rank the episode. As always, we'll rank on our 2 lists, the mostly objective ranking list and the personal ranking list. So on our mostly objective rank values, I highlighted those I felt applied to this episode, and I didn't think that there were any negatives in this episode, so that's always a positive. Anywho, we'll start with our first positive, which is our multi-arc supporting character introduction, which is Zangetsu. Now, I did debate on myself whether or not the swords would count as characters, because every Zanpakuto has a name, and I decided that when Zanpakutos are in their weapon format, they are not going to be considered characters. However, when they are personified and we see them as an actual person, which, spoiler, in a future arc, we see a lot of the Zanpakuto become personified, like, in an actual form. At that point, I will consider them characters, but when they are just in the form of a weapon, then they are a weapon and not a character. In this case, we do get Zangetsu personified within the mindscape, speaking to Ichigo, and therefore he is considered a character in this particular episode, and therefore his introduction counts and is worth +3, as he does appear in multiple arcs as a supporting character. The next positive we have is worth 4 points, and this, of course, is our multi-arc main character development. And this has to do with Rukia receiving the death penalty. She now is sure of her sentence. We've seen her we saw her in prison. Byakuya has come and told her now, officially in 25 days, she will be executed. And then finally, at last, the other that applied to this episode, also worth 4 points, are the multi-arc main character growth. Honorable mention is Inoue gaining the ability to call her power at will. That puts her a step ahead of Shadow, who has not been able to yet summon his power. However, all she's managed to do is summon it, not actually use it at will, etc. So that's why it's an honorable mention, because it is a step up, but a very small one. The one that's worth actual points is the fact that Ichigo manages to regain his own Shinigami powers that are actually his own and not Rukia's powers that she had given him. And we also, of course, have the growth of gaining the Hollow Mask, which is kind of a twist on the Shinigami powers, which, spoiler again, will come into play in the future as well, though not right yet. And Obviously, this is a big boost to his strength as it has taken him back to where he had been before, as now being a Shinigami. And now lesson 3 with Urahara would imply that we are now going to get him. We've got him back to where he started, but with his own powers, and then now we have to take him a step forward so that the next time he meets the Shinigami, he'll be able to actually beat them. And so, with that being there, that brings us to 11 points. As there were no negatives, that makes this a 10 out of 10 episode for the objective ranking. So now a reminder on our arc ranking so far for our mostly objective ranking. We have The Day I Became a Shinigami, The Shinigami's Work, The Older Brother's Wish, The Younger Sister's Wish, Fight to the Death, Ichigo vs. Ichigo, June 17th, Memories in the Rain, Unbeatable Enemy, Back to Back, Fight to the Death, The Encounter, Renji Abarai, and then this episode, Ichigo Becomes a Hollow, is ninth. And the reason that it is ninth is that there have been 8 other 10 out of 10 episodes first, and on the mostly objective ranking, when more than one episode has the same score, they're rated in episode order. Then in 10th, we have Greetings from a Stuffed Lion, A Gentle Right Arm, Flower and Hollow, Ichigo Dies, The Legendary Quincy, Beat the Invisible Enemy, Casual Soul Realm Assault Trip, and then in 17th, Reclaim the Power of the Shinigami, Cursed Parakeet, and so far last place is Khan's Great Plan. Now for this episode, I did feel that it was one of the strongest episodes so far. As I mentioned, there weren't really many negatives. There were a couple scenes where there was some comedy, and okay, so let me organize my thoughts again. So, for example, a disgusting thing that happened was that Jinta convinced Uryu as well to spit on Ichigo while he was down in the pit, in the hole, and that was really gross, and I did not like that. And that was the episode's negative. Otherwise, it was pretty good. We obviously had Rukia basically calmly accepting her sentence and her fate, which she did before she even entered back into Soul Society, even before she left Ichigo's house to basically lead them away from him. She had accepted her fate. She knew from the start that she had broken the laws and that this was a possible fate for her, and she seems to be at peace with accepting the consequences of her actions, which is a very stand up and upright thing to do, so no complaints there. It's sad, but spoilers, as rewatchers, we kind of already know that. Well, we'll talk about it when we get there, but I think it's a very upright thing to do that she is accepting that this punishment is a possibility for her. And then, of course, we have Inoue and Sato, and Inoue makes progress, Sato doesn't, but while he's trying to visualize, he's kind of forgotten what like he knows Karen was involved when he had like when so I'm so disorganized with my thoughts right now. So Yoruichi basically gives them the advice to call their powers to recall the event where they first awakened them and what they were doing at that time to try to mimic that feeling. And Shadow, when he's trying to figure out what he was doing, remembers that there was a red hat, remembers the dark hair, that it was a Ichigo's sister, and basically imagines in his head Ichigo's face with a black wig and a red hat, and basically kind of grosses himself out so he does not successfully remember what happened or the feeling, and that's why he can't awaken his power yet. Whereas then, Inoue, she manages to remember. And it is also amusing because it starts off with her thinking about a squid or like a little octopus because the hollow she faced was tentacled. But then she does actually go into the real memory and the trauma of Tatsuki being attacked and starting to attack her and how she felt then, and that's why she's able to awaken them. But I did find it really funny when Shadow managed to gross himself out by imagining Ichigo in a wig and a hat. essentially, because he couldn't remember what Karen looked like, only that she was related to Ichigo. Very amusing. Then, of course, we have the scene that disgusted me, which was, again, the only negative of the episode. Then we return to Ichigo, and the effect of him turning into a hollow with, like, the mask kind of literally coming out of his orifices in order to affix itself. And then you have all of the, the swirls of power that's all dark around him, blowing up the sand. His inner world is skyscrapers, but he ends up sitting on the side of the building and he's fine until Zangetsu points out that he's impressed he can sit there. Then he realizes, wait, I'm sitting on the side of a building, and then he starts to fall. Zangetsu falls next to him, tries to give his name, isn't heard, gives the other advice, falls into water at the bottom of the skyscraper. All the boxes come down. It's great imagery, is what I'm trying to get at. I don't need to give you a full summary. I already did that, but very nice imagery on that. And then, of course, there's the panic of, oh my gosh, he's almost a hollow. He's starting to break his bonds. And so Tessai, who's been holding the bonds for the days, starts to increasingly cast stronger binding spells until he reaches one where it would kill Ichigo. However, just before that manages to hit him, that is when he manages to regain his powers, and there's this huge light show, and then Ichigo is there with the mask. The mask looks cool, but I do think it doesn't look as cool that he broke the mask and then he just like puts it on the side of his head, the like shattered piece of the mask. It's like either move the whole mask to the side of the head or just take the mask off. I don't know why you're putting like a little tiny sliver of this mask on the side of your head. It seemed a bit odd to me. Odd fashion choices. And then, of course, we get set up once again with a cliffhanger into the next episode that Ichigo is moving on to lesson 3, presumably the last lesson. And anyways, like I said, very good episode, strong episode, doing all the things it's supposed to, and only one part disgusted me, and that is why it is a 9 out of 10 episode. And that brings our personal ranking so far to Casual Soul Realm Assault Trip. This episode in second, Ichigo becomes a hollow. Back to back, a fight to the death, the encounter, Renji Abarai. The older brother's wish, the younger sister's wish. Beat the invisible enemy. A gentle right arm, the legendary Quincy. The Shinigami's work, Cursed Parakeet. Unbeatable enemy. June 17th, Memories in the Rain. The Day I Became a Shinigami. Ichigo dies. Reclaim. The Power of the Shinigami. Greetings from a Stuffed Lion. I swear that blue and the orange do not mix, but I chose it for aesthetics, to be honest. Oh. And then we have in 17th, Flower and Hollow. Fight to the death, Ichigo versus Ichigo. And then in 19th, so last place so far, Khan's Great Plan. And so we come to our final segment of our series rankings so far. And on our mostly objective side, the Agent of the Shinigami arc so far has a score of 158 out of 200. And on the personal side, it has a score of 117 out of 200. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked Bleach, Agent of the Shinigami arc, episode 19, Ichigo Becomes a Hollow. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.